In the previous video, we talked about the diet of the ancient Greeks, yet we focused on what they ate. Today we will discover what types of drinks the Greeks consumed and why a particular beverage played an important role in their culture. Undeniably, the primary drink in ancient Greece was water. It was gathered from springs, wells, and rivers. Due to the rocky terrain of Greece, mountain springs were numerous and were the cleanest source of water. Fetching water from the spring was a daily task for the women of the household. If spring water was unavailable to a city or a village, the inhabitants would draw water from wells and would harvest rainwater through cisterns. They also acquired drinking water from rivers, though sometimes the water was polluted and wasn't suitable for consumption. A common practice among the wealthier people was to place large vases of water inside the well, underneath which they kept ice and snow gathered from the mountains in order to keep the water cold during the hot periods of the year. Sometimes wheat straw was placed upon the ice in order to keep the temperature cold inside the well. During the colder periods of the year, the Greeks preferred to consume a mixture of hot water and honey. In addition, the Greeks consumed a drink named oxycrat, which was a mixture of water, honey, and vinegar. A famous drink in ancient Greece was Kikion, which was a combination of a beverage and a meal. Kikion was comprised of barley meal, goat cheese, wine, honey, and several herbs. The drink was first mentioned by Homer in both the Iliad and the Odyssey. There are also references in later works of poetry and medicinal prescriptions. Demeter, the goddess of agriculture, is often associated with Kikion since its main ingredient was barley meal, and it is believed that it was used in the Eleusinian Mysteries, a rite of passage which was held annually by a cult of Demeter in the Attic town of Eleusis. In the archaic and classical period, Kikion was one of the favorite drinks of those that dwelt in the countryside. This was most probably due to Kikion's digestive properties. Another well-known drink in the countryside was milk, particularly goat milk, both in pure liquid and curdled form. The poet Hesiod, a farmer from the region of Boeotia, describing what he enjoys to do after a hard day's work, says, "Let me have a shady rock and wine of Byblis, a clot of curds, and goat milk." There is some evidence which suggests that beer was consumed during the time of the Minoans and Mycenaeans, but surely not in vast quantities. After the end of the Mycenaean era and until the late Roman period, there is no evidence of Greeks drinking beer, except from those that tasted the exotic drink during their journeys into distant lands, either as travelers or soldiers. Wine was by far the favorite drink of the ancient Greeks, and as we mentioned, it was a major element of the Greek culture for various different reasons. Winemaking first appeared in the region of modern-day Georgia around 6000 BC. It then spread to Persia, the Middle East, and Egypt, reaching the Balkan Peninsula during the end of the 5th millennium BC. Evidence of winemaking was found near the modern city of Kavala in Greece, dating to around 4000 BC, although still in primitive form, since the domestication of wild wines was not yet complete in that region. During the 3rd and 2nd millenniums BC, the Minoans began to produce wine, storing it in very large vases called pithoi that were kept in cellars located in their palaces. Wine was among the major exports of the Minoan trade with the Near East and Egypt. Later, the Mycenaeans would continue the production of wine. Having learned new ways of viticulture from their neighbors, they exported wine to both neighboring and distant regions. Wine production, like every other agricultural production, took a massive blow during the Greek Dark Ages and was scarcely practiced until its restoration and great flourishing during the archaic and classical periods. There are writings that explain in detail how wine was made during those periods. Winemaking was a festival-like event for the inhabitants of every settlement. At first, they would harvest the grapes. This activity was accompanied by music. After the harvest, they would dry the grapes to enhance the sweetness of wine and prevent it from turning into vinegar. They laid the grapes on the ground on specific spots to let the sun dry them. During the night, they would cover the grapes to prevent them from accumulating dew. This process lasted for approximately 10 to 20 days. When the grapes were half dried, they were gathered and later poured into large treading vats. There, the people would stomp on the grapes to release the juice, an activity which was also accompanied by music. The juice was then poured into large vases where the fermentation process took place. When this was over, the people would remove the extra yeast in the wine and would then store the vases in the specific rooms. Sometimes, before stopping them, they added salt water and various herbs to the must. The vases were half buried to maintain a steady temperature. Finally, they added pine resin around the lids to seal the containers properly. The vases were opened during the late winter or early spring. Preserving the quality during the storing process was not easy, making the wines that maintain good quality for many years highly sought after, just like today. The ancient Greeks believed that the older the wine, the more digestive and light it was. These wines were usually consumed by the wealthier people. The ancient Greeks distinguished wine into 4 different categories: the white one, which was the softest of them all, the yellowish one, which was more sour, and the black and red ones, which were sweeter than the others and were also the most sought after. The alcohol percentage was a bit higher than today's wine, averaging at 16%. Wine was preferred cold, especially in the summer, where the wealthier people would put their cold wells to use. The Greeks rarely consumed wine without food. They made sure they had something to eat along with it. In addition, they almost always had their wine mixed with water. They considered pure wine consumption as uncivilized and barbaric. Before their lunch or dinner, they would mix the wine with water inside large vases called craters. The ratio would range between 50% wine and 50% water to 40% wine and 60% water. Most of the times they used fresh water, but sometimes they added salt water instead. During the mixing procedure, they would usually add ingredients for extra flavor like mint, thyme, rosemary, honey, aniseed, and myrtle. As wine production flourished, the ancient Greeks developed new forms of viticulture, learning how to domesticate wild vines rapidly and creating many new and different varieties of grapes. Each region would start producing wine in their own local way, with the wines from the island of Chios, Thasos, Lefkada, and Rhodes being the most famous. The Greeks did not confine themselves to the wines of their region. They also developed a taste for wines of different cultures. Their favorite exotic wines came from northern Thrace and Phoenicia. Wine played a major role in the booming of the economy in many Greek city-states. The period when various forms of viticulture were developed coincided with the founding of the Greek colonies across the Mediterranean and the Black Sea. Through the establishing of these colonies, the Greeks spread viticulture in many distant regions. Some of these regions were already producing wine, but it was mostly the product of wild vines. The ancient Greeks domesticated the wild vines of these regions and exported different varieties of wine into those lands. They also influenced the people that lived further inland, who would slowly start to consume large amounts of wine. Thus, they established an enormous trade network which spread all around the Mediterranean. This is also proven by the writings, shipwrecks, and various containers that were found throughout the coasts of Europe, Africa, and the Near East. It is estimated that every year around 10 million liters of wine were exported to Gaul alone through the river Rhone. As evidence suggests, even the Celts from the region of Burgundy imported Greek wine. As we previously said, in mainland Greece and the surrounding islands, each region had developed its own distinct wine. It was the first time in history where branded regional wines were produced and exported. Each region had its own distinguishedly shaped amphorae or vases, while each vase was branded, bearing the mark of the local lord and the name of the region. Laws were also established to prevent lacing and protect the originality of these wines. Due to the long journeys through the sea, the vases were coated inside in order for the wine to retain its quality. The wine that was destined for local consumption was usually carried inside large sacks made from goat or pig skin. Apart from the purposes we mentioned, wine was also used in the medicinal field, mostly as a disinfectant, but also as a cure for fever, according to the writings of Hippocrates. Wine also played a major role in the culture and religion of the ancient Greeks. They used it as libation in shrines and temples when honoring their gods. Various festivals were held for the god of wine, Dionysus, like the Anastheria and the Dionysia. There were also many local cults of Dionysus in various regions of Greece, where people would indulge in mysterious rites of passage. Every region worshipped a different version of Dionysus, and many of those that produced high-quality wines believed that their god originated from their land, and that in times of old, the rivers were flowing with wine instead of water. Last but not least, wine also played the main role in the symposium, a banquet held by wealthy people in order for them to discuss or celebrate an event. We will expand on this subject in a future video. Although wine was so frequently consumed, the ancient Greeks usually regarded being completely drunk as uncivilized, and with the exception of some eccentric aristocrats, philosophers, and common people, they would usually restrain themselves. Nevertheless, hangover remedies have been found in the writings of cooks and doctors.